dessert for the night.
Stand there if you don't.
Sit down and relax, rest of us.
There's only gonna be a few empty seats.
Me and you?
Huh?
Me and you?
Well, John's here. I don't count.
You don't count.
I think Megan's online.
Oh.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
Sig, Doug, and Glenn are on.
Anybody traveling?
Cam is not feeling good, so he won't be here tonight. And I have not heard from Mark.
I saw him at the post office earlier. Is he there?
Mark?
Yeah. Mark was there. He was here.
Last week.
Okay.
It'll be a very quick meeting.
Famous last words.
But just to prove you wrong.
No, let's make it so. Let's make
It
it
doesn't
so.
sound like a challenge, man.
Jamie?
Hey, Mark.
No challenges.
And then your preferred dates.
All right, well. Guess we're not sure about Doug, and Cam won't be here.
Doug is online, I
Oh,
think.
Doug is on too, okay, great.
Yeah, I think he's on. Yes.
Oh, okay, all right. Cool. And, Miss Kelly is her first name?
Yes,
Miller?
I have not heard from Kelly. Sig had to leave town unexpectedly, and I don't know if she has heard from Kelly.
Okay, well, we will, go ahead if everybody is ready, and, thank you, Jamie, for coming down and giving us a chat. The floor is all yours.
All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present to you this evening. I'm excited. This is my fourth now opportunity, which I hope will be an annual event. Again, the purpose of me coming to speak with you is to give the city council members kind of a feel for where our schools are at towards the beginning of the year, allow you to kind of ask any questions that you may have about operations, financial position, programming, etc., in order for you to feel a little bit more informed about what's going on at school before we enter into discussions about budgeting in the spring. So, Brian, can you have next slide, please? Typically what I like to do is I like to go through our various schools and chat with you a little bit about what's going well and what are some challenges that we've either encountered this year or we foresee is coming up this year. And then we talk about things overall with the district. I'll share with you a little bit about kind of our enrollment and kind of where we are with major maintenance projects, since I know that's often of interest to the city council as well. So at our elementary school, things that are going well is we have a new assistant principal, Mr. Nick Settle, who is fitting in extremely well. And he really hit the ground running. He is brand new as an assistant principal, but he has been a teacher in Alaska for a while, as well as outside of Alaska. This year, we continue with our focus on literacy and especially reading at the elementary school. And what we're doing this year is we're implementing a new reading program that's called Bookworms. It's a little different than some of the programs we have in the past because it focuses around the students are actually reading actual books, like library books, like you would see, rather than a lot of reading programs we see are like short selections and things like that. But this is really encouraging kids to engage with actual books. And we are really looking at what's called science of reading. That is something that has been coming down from the state level, is to really spend time educating our elementary, especially with a focus, especially on K through 3, of ensuring that all of our elementary educators in the state are well versed in science of reading. In other words, what are the best practices that we now know to help kids to actually get to read. Some of our issues is that teachers, since they come from all across the country here, and even at University of Alaska campuses, there's been conversations about the need to really focus on doing a better job of preparing these teachers to be good reading teachers. There will be some other things that I will probably share at a later date with you about how the Alaska Reads Act is going to be impacting our elementary school. We're in the process of making quite a few changes because with the passage of that act in the last legislative session, there are going to be some more demands on our elementary school and our elementary school teachers in particular in preparation for implementing that act and some of the requirements in there. So this program is new, so it has been a lot of work on our elementary school teachers. Last year, we piloted a brand new math program, and this year it's a brand new reading program. So a lot of changes and a lot of shifts as we're getting comfortable with implementing those in the classroom. One thing that our principal, Ms. KJ, has done is she's developed a variety of school committees to really work on a lot of staff and student support and climate issues, and let that be something that comes more from the grassroots level rather than something that comes from the top down. So that seems to be being received very, very well. Additionally, like I said, the continued focus on literacy last spring, towards the end of April, the state sponsored a conference on the science of reading, and we were given the commissioner, Michael Johnson at the time, gave us basically a free in-service day in our calendar to allow schools around the state to send large groups of teachers, because they understand that there's no way to send your entire staff or a large portion of your staff, as many districts as of now are still struggling with having enough substitutes. So we will be doing that again this year. There is another Science of Reading conference coming up as well. We are seeing an increase in enrollment. So we are one of the districts in the state that is bucking the trend of declining enrollment, and I'll show you that on one final slide. Our kindergarten classes this year are quite large. Our kindergarten classes are roughly on the order of about 23 or 24, higher than we would like. But it does show that we are seeing some increases in enrollment. Next slide, please. So what are some challenges? Well, staffing continues to be the biggest issue. I'm sure you've heard quite a bit. We had to close the high school for our staffing day, and today we had to close Belts entirely. Today we had to close just the high school because of illness and not enough substitutes. So at the elementary school, we had one classroom teacher that wasn't able to show, so we had to basically collapse our 3 fourth grade classes into 2. So we had 2. Luckily, that was a smaller cohort, but again, the class sizes are more like 24 and 25, just higher than we would like. We were unable to fill one of our SPED teaching positions. We had an individual hired that did not come. So our new SPED director has been focusing on taking care of all of our preschool students. So she goes down and she visits Head Start and Nome Preschool and provides services to our students on IEPs there. And the other 2 teachers that we were hired are kind of splitting some of the remaining classroom, the remaining caseloads between those 2 teachers. Our struggles to fill those support positions is a challenge. We still have not been able to find a behavior specialist after several years. Special education paraprofessionals is becoming a big issue down there. We were down to 1 at one time, and then we now we're down to 1 and 3 quarters. We have somebody that's working about 6 hours and working up slowly. Substitutes, we have more of our substitutes that have indicated a preference to work at the elementary school than at the other campuses. However, sometimes there's still not that many of them, and they're not available every single day. So that still is a challenge. We've been getting a little creative. We have many of our students in the Educators Rising program at the high school, which has a much increased enrollment this year. We have about 20 plus students that are interested in that program. That have some time in their schedules, because they're juniors or seniors, and they spend part of their day to come down and work as paraprofessionals in the classrooms down there. So they are actually getting some exposure to the education profession, literally on the ground. We also have some students that are enrolled in our extensions homeschooling program that have been working as part-time paraprofessionals down there, usually a couple of hours a week, not talking a 20-hour-a-week job. So the challenge, as I mentioned earlier, is preparing for the requirements of the Alaska Reads Act. This does mean that all of our teachers are going to have to be taking some additional professional development in the form of college courses or other deed-approved training with an assessment, which is 6 hours in actual reading classes. So that's going to be a challenge for some. That includes our administrators as well. Will also have to take those, or they will not be eligible for employment. It's also going to be a challenge because this is going to be an expectation right now. We're trying to work with the deed and giving them feedback. All the superintendents were giving them feedback about the challenges of being told that we can't hire anybody next year from out of state that doesn't have these requirements in place. We kind of said that's going to make things really difficult. We already do have, and we would love to be able to just hire homegrown Alaska teachers. There aren't enough of them to go around. So that's something that we're working on. We will have to be doing individual reading plans for children that are scoring below proficient. So that's going to be something that we're going to have to be preparing for. The state has now approved a screener that we're going to have to implement. It's one we've used before in the past. We went away from it, trying some other screeners. This one is going back to what's called DIBELS, which is the dynamic indicators of basic literacy skills. So we'll be back to that, which we have done before, but now it's going to be required by the state to be administered 3 times a year. It also helps indicate if we have any students that need to be further screened for dyslexia. The staff morale is still somewhat low from the pandemic, although I think the elementary school has tried to do a better job, but there's still a lot of lingering stress, a lot of feeling from educators that the behavioral issues with kids are not where they should be. The scores, of course, you're hearing a lot of on the media about the conversation about NAEP scores being low. The results of the AK STAR were released at a district and school level. Individual reports will be going home to students, but they're still mirroring the trend, which is especially in mathematics. There is definitely a significant decline. Reading is somewhat flat, but still not scoring where we need to be. It's really difficult for teachers, although this is a brand new test again, so we have to take that into consideration. It still does have an impact on the morale of teachers. It's also stressful when we're missing people in the building and the substitutes. It's difficult for teachers then to accept the fact that they're ill and they have to be out, and they feel bad because they understand that puts some additional stress on the school, especially if a substitute can't be found. So all of those things really have an impact on morale of teachers. Next slide, please. All right, so we look at Nome Belts, middle high. Obviously, our athletics are doing exceptionally well. We had vice basketball state champions last spring. Natalie Tobuk was our state wrestling champion this year and looks poised to repeat that this year, given how she's been doing in the wrestling season thus far. The esports were state champions last year for both fall and spring, so that's a newer program. They were actually nationally ranked in the top 20 for esports as well. This year, our volleyball girls obviously went to state. Unfortunately, they were eliminated, but they had an excellent season, did very, very, very well. Wrestling is also looking to do extremely well this year. We have our new principal, Ms. Terrascovia Smith, was promoted from assistant principal to the principal position. She's a long-term individual here in our community and in the state. She's very passionate about our students' well-being, our students' success, as well as our staff. I think that, and she wants to be here long-term. We've discussed that stability in leadership is really crucial for us to make changes. So we're very happy to have her. And then we also added a half-time position to the middle school because, again, we've also seen some increased enrollment, especially at the middle school level. And so we really needed a little bit of an extra position, a generalist, to kind of address that. Next slide.
What is it, is that a certified or a classified position?
I'm sorry? Certified are typically teachers. They're
No,
individual.
and this generalist, is this a certified or a classified?
It is a certified position, yes, yes. It just means that they are usually teaching more than one content area.
Yep, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Okay, challenges at the high school, of course, is that we have seen some continued challenges with negative student behaviors, and vaping has become a significant issue this year. We have done a pilot with a couple of vape detectors in a couple of our bathrooms. They're working very well. This is one that works, and it works in tandem with our camera system, our security camera system that's already installed. So when the vape detector goes off,
In the bathrooms?
yes, the vape detectors are installed in the bathroom.
The cameras?
Not the cameras.
Okay.
The vape detectors are in the bathroom. So when the vape detectors go off, the cameras in the hallways outside the bathrooms are then activated to record. No, we do not have security cameras in the bathrooms. I promise you that. No. We do not compromise student privacy.
They were working in tandem.
But it
Somehow
worked
I
in
lost
tandem,
something.
yes. So the vape detector goes off in the bathroom, the camera outside the bathroom is then activated. And we can actually identify which students are likely, who just came out shortly after the vape went off. We are going to be installing these all throughout the rest of the bathrooms there, using some of our remaining COVID funding to do that. However, we are also going to be working on the education portion of it because a lot of this is actually not just happening at the high school level, it's also happening in our middle school students as well. A lot of our kids we know are not cognizant of the consequences of vaping. There is, I think, a lot of misconception among our students that vaping is less dangerous than cigarettes. It's still illegal for them to have them, and they're supposed to be too young to purchase them. However, most of them report, and this is not just us, it is a statewide issue and a nationwide issue as well. They get them from others. So we will be trying to do some education with them, trying to work with some of them. We'll be coordinating with the Coeric Wellness and the camp department as well to make sure that we get some opportunities to start having discussions, trying to refer students that are caught vaping with them to help with, basically breaking that a particular addiction. But they're highly, highly addictive devices. So some other challenges that we had there is the assistant principal that we hired at the last minute did not show up. And our behavior specialist left not too far into the beginning of the school. So that left Ms. Smith without any of the supports when dealing with these increased behaviors, vaping, etc. So it has been an incredible challenge for her to try to do. She's basically trying to do both jobs at once, which is not fair to her. But she's doing the absolute best that she can under the circumstances. However, we did hire a classified dean of students in lieu of a certified assistant principal for the remainder of the year. And we're very happy because we do have a behavior specialist that started today. So we're getting those supports back in place. We've been polling some of our special education director this year, has quite a few years as a principal. She's been over there providing support. Mr. Settle, the elementary assistant principal, has been up there as much as he can to provide support. I've been doing a little bit of substituting as needed, but it's been really challenging in how to appropriately handling lower level behavior and discipline. So it's been really everyone hands on deck having to kind of get creative and how are we going to shift our systems until we can put some of our normal supports back into place. Again, very few substitutes. At one point in time, we had a single person that was willing to sub at the high school. That was it, one person. We have with some of the publicity lately and some appeals out to some organizations in the community, we do have a few more subs that are now willing to work at the high school. It's not enough, it's not quite adequate, but it's definitely an improvement over where it was before. Our front office staff turned over.
Yeah, what's the main challenge for subs? Is it pay? Is it work schedule?
I don't think it's pay because we actually pay really, really quite well. I think a lot of it is just, we've had some folks in the past that were just they've just been subbing forever, and some of them retired or left the state for other opportunities, so the pool kind of dried up a little bit. I think a lot of people just didn't realize that the need was quite so dire. It's always been doable in the past, kind of made do. This year it's just been, like I said, just a lot of people I'm just not going to do it this year. We pay pretty well. The Belts campus can be challenging for folks because, first of all, transportation. If you live in town, you have to be able to get out to the campus. And also, some people are a little bit more intimidated by working with older students than they are at the elementary school. A lot of people feel much more comfortable in there working with the little people than they are working with, older kids that might just go off or something like that, which they feel more comfortable doing when they're in like 9th grade than they do when they're in 2nd grade.
I was really encouraged by senior Nome announced this weekend and said you guys found six substitutes. Is that right?
Yeah, we found 6 total. Not all of them were at the high school because substitutes express preference for the campuses at which they would like to work at. Some of them say, I'll work at any campus. Some of them say, I'm only interested in the elementary school. We have had a couple that said, I'm happy to work at the high school. You can just put me there whenever you want.
So just for the public, how much does it pay?
If you only have a high school degree, it's $155 a day. If you have a college degree in any area, it's $260 a day.
That's what, 8 hours a day?
No, it's a 7.5 hour day. Okay, you have a lunch in there, half an hour lunch. You also get a prep period if you're at the high school. At the elementary school, it's a little shorter because teachers' prep periods at elementary school at the end of the day, but the substitutes leave when the students leave. So then they're done. So it's actually a little less than an 8 hour day there. It does not come with any benefits because they are considered temporary employees, but it's actually very flexible. You can work as much or as little as you want, really. We have enough absences that somebody who really wanted to could work every single day. They really could.
Is this vaping, Jamie? Is this tobacco? Is it other?
The vaping is, they're electronic cigarettes.
Yeah, but I guess, you can be smoking pot out of them or you can be smoking.
Most of
tobacco,
it's
and I
just
guess-
nicotine. Most of it is nicotine. There has been a few that are marijuana related. We are also seeing a little bit of an uptick in students with chewing tobacco as well. That's becoming a little bit more prominent. We don't know if this stems from students that had more time with or without parent supervision during closures or just things with COVID in general, more access, kids feeling boredom, whatever their challenges are. But we just are seeing a rise in tobacco use and other associated products.
And I don't know, I guess I'm thinking maybe the vaping things also can be purchased online.
Yes.
Because I know that was the challenge when we had that kratom going on here that, we got the local folks to quit selling it for a period, but it was coming in off the internet.
Yeah.
And so.
Yeah, and they're very well marketed towards kids. If you look at them, they come in bright colors. They're flavored, bubble gum, fruit punch, grape. Then they say they're not marketing to kids, but you know that those types of things are very attractive to kids. Yeah, so it is something that we are really, really having, and the education piece is what we're, everything's always, we're always seem to be behind. There's always something new, challenging, and we have to figure out how to react and how to get our kids to understand what's going on so they can make better choices. It's tough, if they're doing and they're consuming a lot of nicotine because it's just so addictive. We have some kids out there that just really struggle because they know they're going to get in trouble. And so we have kids that are literally kind of going through nicotine withdrawal to try to get through school, to try not to vape at school so they don't get caught and get in trouble. We're trying to, make parents aware. Sometimes parents are surprised to find out their kid is vaping. Sometimes they know already. But we're trying to work. I know some vaping devices have the ability to adjust the amount of nicotine that is delivered. And so we're trying to have those conversations so that the students can know that there's a way to start to taper off and try to get off if you really genuinely want to quit the device. Many of the devices have a built-in way you can taper off the nicotine for yourself, and then it's just a case of breaking any psychological addiction that they have.
Yeah, I mean, people just don't understand that the vaping, in my opinion, is as bad on your lungs as the cigarette is.
One of the real challenges, of course, is that typically with cigarettes, it can take years to actually see physical health effects. You don't get emphysema after smoking for a year. But the case is what they call vape lung, which are some very serious respiratory complications, which can actually result in death, can occur within a few months of starting to vape. Kids just don't know and understand that risk is something very immediate.
Well, I'd assume this new behavioral specialist will concentrate on that.
They certainly can help with those supports. So having somebody that can, we want to try to approach as much as we can. Our approach has always been to try to work with restorative justice, working with low-level behaviors, not so punitive, but helping, having discussion with kids about, making their choices type of thing, helping them alternatives to suspension. And it's been challenging with not having people that they can go and talk with or be with. When it was just Miss Smith, there was nobody else. A lot of times the only option thus far has been is out-of-school suspension. So that's not where we want to go, but it's unfortunately been a very difficult situation. Nobody wants to suspend kids. There are circumstances where it is appropriate, but it's just been way too high. She's completely aware of that, and I'm completely aware of that, and I understand the reasons why. And now getting Dr. Kai Huyen, who's now the dean, who has a great background with kids and a doctorate in psychology, and then our behavior specialist coming in there. So those are coming back where they need to be. So again, with the lack of substitutes, the other type of challenges is, for example, we have 2 counselors out there that are absolutely great working and having those. They can have those discussions with kids as well, but they can't counseling if they're covering a class. So we have people that are doing things that have not been hired to do. They're not being allowed to do what they were hired to do and what they're good at. So having those subs as well will allow them to be out there and working with kids, and that will also help bring down some of the behaviors. They can have those discussions with kids. Again, the morale has been really challenging at the high school. Ms. Smith has been working really hard because, when Mr. Thomas was there, that was a big focus of him, was making sure that staff felt supported, putting a lot of time in the classrooms, having that. She's been working as hard as she can to try to keep that going while she's just one person. It's been more challenging, but I know that she's really trying to address and give staff opportunities to feel that they're heard, to feel that they're supported, to feel that their well-being is also of importance as well as student well-being. But it is exhausting right now, dealing with the behaviors and, staff doing what they shouldn't be doing. They're not able to do their jobs. They're providing class coverage instead, asking a teacher, can you go cover this class because we're desperate, closing down school for a day. Nobody likes any of these types of things. So hopefully, as things start to improve, the morale is going to come up as well.
When you close school for a day like that, is it a makeup day at some other point?
It depends. So the day that we closed a couple of weeks ago, they will do their makeup day on the 28th, which will be an in-service day for the other schools. It will be makeup day for students. The one today, so the half day was done as a remote learning day. So we utilized one of our Blizzard bags, which again, we know that doesn't substitute for a normal day of school, but if we don't have enough substitutes, we can't herd all the kids, we can't, herd 200 kids into the gym, throw a couple teachers in there. That's not an ideal situation either.
What's and just kind of from the 1,000-foot level, what's causing these staff shortages. I mean, you talked about, I think, one of the principals, they just didn't show up. One of them showed up and then they left right away.
No, he just never showed.
I mean,
Friday, he finally told us we were worried he was ghosting us, we weren't getting any response, and then the Friday before he was supposed to show up, he finally responded and said, yeah, I'm not coming.
but I'm really curious as to what you see is kind of the challenge. Is it pay? Is it benefits? Is it location? Is it the work environment? I mean, probably a lot of answers to that.
Your first three are probably what I call the big three. Pay is tough. Nome does not have as deep of pockets as some of the surrounding communities. We don't, because we're not an REA, which means that we have to rely on you, the city council, to make up some of it in our budget. And I appreciate the city council has steadily risen over the past several years, has increased its contribution, but it's never funded all the way to the cap. It's right up, we're up close to 80% now. Benefits are huge. We are the only state in the country that does not offer a defined benefit retirement option to public service workers. They got rid of that back in 2008. So we have older teachers that are able to retire and have a pension. For us newer teachers or newer administrators like myself, it is a 401k. And all their predictions are going to say you're probably going to outlive your 401k, which is good if you don't have anything else. Plus, remember, we are also a windfall elimination profit state. Teachers do not pay into Social Security. You get a public pension, and because we're a WEP state, that means if you worked in another state and you got Social Security benefits there, your Social Security benefits will be reduced because you worked in the WEP state. It's a double whammy. That is something the legislature is having conversations about addressing. It came up in a bill last session by a state representative that is not going to be reelected, so somebody else will have to pick up that bill and run with it for this session.
So the way that private industry deals with that issue, if it's less benefits, you increase your pay, you increase your compensation levels. What kind of flexibility does the schools have in saying, to whether it's the certified versus the professional positions? What kind of flexibility do you have in saying, I can match somebody's pay, even if it's a little bit different than what you're trained for, you're certified for? Do you have a lot of flexibility within, say, your union agreements to say, we'll go $5 an hour more on a case-by-case basis? Do you have that ability to do that?
We have salary schedules, so we can't say we're going to pay one teacher better and the other teacher less, unfortunately. So you're what they call tier 1 or tier 2. Those are the terminologies for the teachers that have been in the system longer and have the defined benefits. And the others, you're tier 3, so we're going to increase your salary. That's never been something that's come up in negotiations. Also, schools are unlike a business in that we have very limited ways to increase our revenue. And so because the state funds us primarily, the majority of our funding comes from the state, and the state has flat funded us for now 7 years in a row. We've received the same amount of revenue every year per child, even though salaries increase. The salary schedule, teachers get more money with more experience. We've also, through negotiations, there's also been increases for covering cost of living. We all know the same types of pressures that every individual is feeling right now with higher fuel costs and higher electricity costs. The school feels all of those right along with. Everything that we purchase costs more. The amount of what I call really truly discretionary expenditures is actually more around 10 to 15% of our budget. Our M&O costs, by and large, we don't have that, and our insurance premiums have been going up every single year just for our liability and our property insurance and our vehicle insurance. We were very lucky for our staff. For several years, we were actually seeing zero increase in health insurance premiums, which is kind of unheard of, but that's where we were for a little while. And this last year, we kept it to 5%. We don't know what it's going to be next year.
So even if you had more money
Well, if I had more money,
Well,
we definitely have conversations about.
well,
maybe
if you
paying
had more
staff
money,
better.
you would still be limited by the agreements, the time or the tier or whatever employees. And I just want, I'm trying to
Yeah,
understand that.
so
Even
the retirement system is statewide, administered just by the state.
I'm just an hourly rate or salary rate. You don't really have much flexibility. I'm kind of thinking this is very similar to what the city and the state's dealing with like their operators and their grader guys and, truck drivers. Private industry has the ability to adjust very quickly and say, we'll hire you at a higher rate. But you as a union or government entity don't have that flexibility. Is that fair? I understand the
To a
benefits.
certain extent, however,
So the question is there anything that you can do as the school district can do to get around those union required pay scales that really limit your ability to negotiate pay?
not a whole lot of wiggle room. However, if the state decides to increase dramatically our revenue for the next year, I don't think any of our unions would have a problem if we said we'd like to meet with you because we would like to discuss increasing pay because we have more revenue, we need to give it to you. I don't think any of them would quibble about sitting down and doing an amendment to the negotiated agreement in the middle of the term if it meant better pay for them.
Probably never happened before, right?
Nope.
Yeah, but then when that money runs out, then what do you do?
Yeah, and that's always our challenge when we tell people, it's always our challenge when we obviously sit down at the negotiating table, because anything we do is going to have long-term effects. It's easy to give and very difficult to pull back from an employer point of view.
Agreed.
Yeah, so.
Because it doesn't really sound like you have an enrollment problem, like say Anchor
No,
School.
we
District,
do
read
not.
about
So
that
that's
all the
one
time.
bright spot that we do have this year compared to many other districts, because like, for example, there've been conversations, I've even had one person reach out directly and say, are we looking at the same type of a budget situation as Anchorage has? Because obviously they get a lot of press about their shortfall and school closure. And I said, no, for a couple of reasons, which, I can talk about a little later when we talk about the district. So that will be the thing.
And I don't mean to stay on this too long, but so you don't think the unions would be willing to say, hey, for this year or for a short period of time, we're willing to look at some flexibility in the compensation rates to get you, the compensation level that you need to attract quality folks, right?
Well, there's always a
So you
conversation.
don't have a longer term deal. I mean, because we're seeing it in government entities everywhere where these very rigid pay scales don't allow the organizations to adapt to the current environment. And we're all competing for the same folks. And private industry seems to be winning pretty well.
Right.
Because they have that flexibility and government agencies like school district do not.
Yeah, correct.
So,
Well,
part of the unions are willing to be flexible on this to allow the adequate compensation to get your folks in, even if it's for a shorter time frame.
And to be the devil's advocate on that point right there is that I'm not gonna come to Nome, Alaska to take a job based on this pay structure being for 2 or 3 years and it may get reduced. You see, that's the challenge, I think. And then, I guess, it's never, never the right thing to do to talk about cutting things out. We come to enjoy them, want them, what have you. But, if and there are things that simply can't be cut. But I know that over time, this community has made decisions to add programs and things that they thought were important or that they wanted that were not the RRR or whatever you call it, reading, writing, arithmetic type of thing. And, we've added counselor, we've added language programs, we've added a whole bunch of things. And, I guess at some point in time, is that something that we need to look at again? Because it always comes down to you're going to cut sports, and then everybody's going to say, "Hell no, we don't want to do it." But there are other things and programs in there between, and I only bring it up because if there's $1 million bucks, I'm just going to take a number to go around for 10 teachers or whatever it is. And, one way to increase it is to get it down to 8, but you're cutting 2 programs out, and is that, a discussion at some point in time that is not pleasant to have, but needs to occur? It's a rhetorical question.
You know, that's always part of, you know, when it comes to budgeting for next year. You know, we always, you know, want to look to, you know, prioritization is challenging because not everybody's priorities are going to be the same. But, you know, if we do reach that point where the conversation has to be, you know, we will be going through certified negotiations will occur this year. Our negotiated agreement for certified staff will be expiring at the end of this year. Our agreements are 3 years in length, maximum. That's what we're allowed by law. Can't go any longer than 3 years.
Has
So-
anything changed in the way that leave benefits are accrued and used over the last several years?
As
Are
far
leave
as-
benefits always been the same, or because I don't remember school ever being shut down before, is either people are getting more sick, or they're always been sick and then we've always had substitutes, or what's, you know, I'm just wondering.
Well, I think like today is kind of the reflection of the fact that, you know, our flu rates are like spiking kind of weirdly, and it's just kind of running through the high school staff. We just had quite a few, and it's a little bit more unusual in that the flu doesn't tend to hit, you know, younger people nearly as hard as it has been this year. Typically, the flu is most challenging for, you know, people that are older, compromised immune systems, children, etc. And well, it's very possible. I don't have specific immunization data on people who's got their flu shots or not. We're not tracking that. But, you know, younger people often say, I don't need a flu shot. I'm young and healthy. So, well, and people who get to my age and you're like, poke me with whatever you got because I don't want to be sick. So, yeah, it's been a weird year. So
We used to be sick for 1 or 2 days, now it's for 1 or 2 weeks.
Yeah.
That's what's going on.
Yeah, it's bad. It's also bad among the children. We are seeing a lot of our younger people are, you know, we're seeing a lot of absenteeism in students right now, just because of illness, you know, flu and other upper respiratory illnesses this year. So, but yeah, you know, we always try to look at, you know, benefits are always kind of, you know, we've always tried to, of course, offer your standard, you know, you get health insurance and vision insurance and dental insurance. You have access to the retirement system. There are other types of retirement programs that are not part of the state requirement. We have what's called a 403B or a 457 plan that allows teachers to put money away in a plan tax-free that has nothing to do with the retirement system. It's portable. They can take it to another district and continue that as long as that district also offers a similar plan as well. But that's an individual decision on the part of a school district. We offer both to our employees. So it's a way of building up additional. It's not considered a 401k. It's just for people working for us. So then we try to do other things that cost us less money, or there's some benefits we can try to build in that don't really actually have a cost to the district per se. So we try for those. Any other questions thus far? I know I'm going through quite a bit.
Thank you for indulging us.
Okay, no problem. This is part of that, we want to have that conversation. Okay, so when we look at our charter school, the reality is this one is probably in the best shape staffing wise. They've had all of their teachers came back, every single one, no changes. However, in special education, there is an increase in some special education students, and we actually really do need another paraprofessional here now. Well, we need we need all 3 campuses. So they're doing the best as far as student achievement. Their scores are down again on the state exam, but they are still higher in general schools. Again, staff retention, and we also did. Thank you to Ms. Leeper and her focus and her love for arts in education. We did a statewide Arts and Culture Academy, and along with that's part of the state Arts Education Consortium. And we had educators that came from all over the region and other places across the state as well. We had about 25 teachers here in August. A lot of them were our teachers, or brand new teachers, but we had teachers from all over the state who came out here and participated in the 4-day academy. It was really great.
What do you think is responsible for the better staff retention at Emerald, at the Science Academy than the rest of the district?
First of all, it's very small, so relationships are tight. But we're also that science teacher position used to be like 1 a year, and then they just 1 a year, and then they just disappeared, but they're just happy that the science teacher now has been stable.
Consistent.
The other positions in there, people have been working there for a very long time. Ms. Leeper has worked at the school for over 20 years. Ms. Johnson is 20 years. Mr. Collins, I think, is, I want to say between 12 and 15 years. So we have some people who have been part of the community for a long time. And we added another position last year, a half-time reading position to allow Ms. Leeper more time to focus on her administrative duties because she is a principal teacher. She teaches and she's the principal, but it's very challenging for her to deal with principal things when she was in the classroom. If a kid was, having a meltdown or something like that and she needed to do something disciplinary, it was in the middle of her class, somebody would have to kind of come in and keep an eye on it for her. So, and Ms. Ventress has been with the district for a long time.
Well, because they're a charter school, but they're still treated as teachers, same benefits, same pay
Absolutely.
scale.
That's
It's all
correct.
kind of the same, and that's why I was wondering.
Same
why-
scout, same salary schedule, same benefits. However, one thing, that school is self-selected. There's still a lottery system, but they do have prioritization, and then, for certain groups of students, then it drops down to the rest who are actually in a lottery. And they also, part of the requirement there is parental involvement. It's something that if you want to be here, you have to put in, and there's a whole bunch of different ways that you as a parent can do that. But it's really part of the culture there is parental involvement, which is also really helps with morale and support. So they'll get somebody to come out and help with, lunch supervision or recess supervision. They call on parents.
It's been 8 years out there doing that.
Yeah.
Both my kids,
Yeah.
I was
We've been through
either
there.
substituting, they call, or I.
Yeah. So they have a more willing, ready pool of people to help with support when it's needed.
I'm not familiar with it, but I'm just wondering, what are they doing right or different that maybe, it just,
Yeah, we've had some conversations about,
they seem to be doing something right.
yeah, we've had some conversations around trying to transform the middle school belts into a model that is more similar, because how they structure their curriculum, how they structure how students are grouped and moved through the schools is different. But it is something we do tend to see, and you can actually see it when the fifth grade. If you look at the fifth graders and how they score on exams at the state exam on ACSA, and then you look at how they score the ones that are left at the elementary school, and you're pulling off a lot of your higher performing students, your leaders, a lot of involved parents. So if you're a parent that really cannot participate in that type of expectation of level of volunteerism at the school, it's difficult to say, yeah, I'll put my child over there. I don't have, but I can't meet that. Also, students that are struggling with expectations there, if it isn't going well, they go back to the middle school, the high school. So, like I said, there's some definite pros and cons when we have conversations about charter schools in general too. So, I'm still supportive of it. It's a great school. They do a really good job with the kids, but they just have a different student body. Just do. Okay, so they are not without their challenges. So the staff morale is generally better here, but people are still tired. The pandemic exhaustion for teachers is still a very, very real thing. And one thing that Ms. Leeper talked about is even with the expectation of parent engagement and volunteerism, they were really struggling, especially during COVID, to get it there. So there's a real big push to have that conversation with parents about, we need you to volunteer. Here are different ways that you can volunteer. So they're worried about that. Ms. Leeper does have some concerns a little bit about sustainability of the program. She stepped up in the program when Todd Heineman, the former principal, left. She was a teacher there for quite some time. Because it really is kind of a unique culture, unique expectations and everything that they work with. She's been with the school 20 years, 25. When you sort of hit that 20 to 25 year, when you get into there, people are really starting to have conversations about retirement, thoughts about potentially retirement. Her children are aging, and her one son graduated, and her other son is actually attending college in the lower 48 with family. So, that's something to think about. And then I think about successor. How do we grow a successor? Will we have somebody that can come in and keep what's unique to keep the program program going, so we'll just kind of have to wait and see. Okay, so lastly, is to talk a little bit about what happens at the district level.
Extensions?
Oh, sorry, extensions.
Yeah.
So extensions is our homeschooling program. And the enrollment for that has been growing. We figured that we would probably see a little bit of fallout from the pandemic as far as that was concerned, that we would see some families who tried homeschooling because they had some concerns about either they did not want their children in school with exposure to COVID, they opposed a all student a mandatory masking policy. So we had a huge spike, as you'll see on one of the next to last slides here, in enrollment, and then it dropped back down, but we've had some families that are growing, but that's also could be a reflection of the fact that overall enrollment is increasing. So typically we've had somewhere between 15 to 20 is pretty average in the past, and this year we're, I think we have 29 students in the program today. So that program is growing.
In Anchorage, there's been conversations about one of the reasons, not the sole reason, but one of the reasons that enrollment is down in the school district is because of a lot of kids, or a lot of parents took their kids out and put them in homeschooling during COVID and then realized for whatever reason, this is what we want to continue doing, and they're just not returning. Do you anticipate, a similar type of trend? Do you think the homeschooling will
We think
go back
that-
to historical levels?
We think that most of the families that put their kids in COVID decided they liked it overall, probably staying. So we saw a huge spike, it doubled, tripled. And then when we came back the following year, the number came way back down again. But now they're just, they're kind of, they went back down to normal historic levels, and then they've been kind of creeping up a little bit. So it could be some families that are moving here that want to participate in. This is a statewide program, so we reach out and we can offer it. So for example, BSSD students, BSSD does not have its own homeschooling program. They can enroll if they want.
So this is moneymaker isn't the right term, but so, and then is it a legal requirement to provide this?
No.
Then why do we do it? If we're losing money and it's not a legal requirement, why would we do it?
Because if we don't, these families are not likely to stay in Nome. So it's not fully, I would say that we try to get it to where it about breaks even. It really depends on the enrollment, because a significant portion of the amount of money, so in case you're not familiar with how the school finances homeschooling students, is that homeschooling students, we take into account special education enrollment, so there is a multiplier for that for students there. But we don't have any of the other, I think they also do the cost, but they actually might not do it, I have to remember off the top of my head, but all of the other multipliers that apply to all of our students that are enrolled in our brick and mortar school, the majority of them do not apply to students that are enrolled in homeschooling. Then they basically take that and they only give us 90% of the amount that the other students do. So $5,930 has been the BSA, the base student allocation, for 7 years in a row now.
Right.
But we only get 90% of that for a homeschooling student.
So
It's ed if they are special ed.
So on average, the extension students, the school district receives less per student,
Correct.
generally because they don't have as many multipliers or added on.
Correct. On the other hand, we don't typically, obviously in enrollment, you don't have a physical building.
Right.
Right, we don't have to pay, teachers per student.
You're not
But we
paying.
still have to have a teacher of record at the very minimum for a certain number of students. So there still has to be a teacher involved that's working with the parents to make sure that, that oversees the parents' plan for their child, make sure, and they assist with assessments. So there is still, the students here submit a portfolio of work, and our teacher of record is the one that actually looks at it and makes sure that the parent assigned grade and their assigned grade will match. The parents say, this is my child, and they're really doing A work, and the teacher of record says, well, that's not A work, they're not meeting the standards, so they're working together to come up with a reasonable grade. She also oversees, a large portion of the money that comes in goes back to the families in the form of an allotment. The students receive an allotment per student, which is $4,600. We receive, if you think about it, we receive basically about $5,500 per student instead of the almost $6,000. And $4,600 of that is available back to the family per that child.
To
So
provide,
that doesn't leave a whole lot of money, if you think about it, for us to pay for our teacher of record, her salary and her benefits on top of all that.
And that's set by the state, the allotment part?
There's a certain amount, yes, but we also have to remain competitive because we have some very large programs in the state. Raven Homeschooling and IDEA and GILA are the three largest homeschooling programs in the state. They're offered by individual districts. For example, Raven Homeschooling, Yukon-Koyukuk, I think it's about 80% of their enrollment is in their homeschooling program. The actual physical enrollment in their physical villages that they serve is very small. But they're considered a much larger district because they bring in thousands of students from across the state.
last question, I promise. The extension students,
Mhm.
how do they typically test in comparison to classroom? You know, like with the STAR and the various standardized testing, how do the extension students typically test on average compared to in-classroom teaching?
Um,
I assume they're taking the same test.
They do. That is a requirement unless they exercise the state given to all parents, which is I'm opting my child out. Although if they do that too often, we disenroll them from the program. So I can't give, I'd have to look at that individually because it's such a small program.
Mhm.
The state doesn't give us like a school report for those. The groups are too small. I'd have to go back and I think last year it was still too small. The state just has their algorithm, and if you have under a number of students, they don't start reporting things out because it doesn't protect student privacy. People could potentially figure out which students fall into which groups. If we're this large in the spring, we might get enough information to really compare them. Otherwise, I'd have to look at individual students, which really isn't truly a fair comparison. So, but we do monitor that. If we have children that, the parents are supposedly working with them and the scores are, they're below, and they're, everything, that's a conversation with the teacher of record and the parent to say, well, what, do we need a special education referral? What are you doing? So we try to monitor their performance pretty carefully.
So BSSD is possibly paying for some of these students as
Correct.
well.
Correct, a couple
Where
of them.
people live.
We have a couple from Anchorage now as well, families that have ties to the Nome area.
I lied, not the last question. So I think to answer John's question, well, why do we do it if we lose money, compared to in-classroom teaching? And I think your response was, if we don't, you'd probably have a number of families leaving the community
Correct.
because there would be no homeschooling opportunities in the region. And that
They would
be
just,
the loss of all
if
these
it's possible, or some of them, when they leave, they wouldn't continue to be enrolled here. We have some families that have done that. They're tied to Nome, and maybe they're leaving, and maybe it's kind of a temporary basis. We have families that are going for medical, they're gonna be gone for quite some time because they have another child, but still, they wanna continue to have their children tied to Nome and still have that. Because the homeschooling families, we can offer them access to the same materials that are used in the other schools for adopted curriculum materials. We can give those to them for absolutely free. There's no cost to the family. They can use their allotment for other things. So a lot of them do like that. And even when we get to a certain, there's certain levels. So Ms. Ventris, who's been our homeschooling teacher of record for several years now, we had her half-time for quite a while, just because of the number of students and her costs and everything like that. She's teaching full-time now because she's teaching the other half of her day is at the charter school. So she's half-time there teaching students and only half-time teaching all these extension students. So we do try to, be flexible about how much we actually pay that teacher versus how many students are actually enrolled in that program, which helps us figure out a way to kind of keep costs as close to breaking even as we possibly can. So, when we get to a certain point, they would generate enough income that we could she could do this full time, but we have to get to a certain point where we need to start to have that discussion as far as enrollment's concerned. So it's not really always a money loser. We try to make it so it breaks even. But if we don't, these students might just enroll in other programs around the state. So she wouldn't have a job, but we wouldn't have those students.
Okay, I think we'll let this go a little bit over so you can finish.
Yep, I'll try to finish up
We'll
quickly.
hold any other comments till the end.
Conversations. Okay. So again, the challenges, again, our teacher is trying to now juggle, halftime with more students. So figuring out how to support her and how to find funds to adequately pay her for the difference. Okay, next slide. This is the district-wide. So we are now in reasonable financial shape. Where we're sitting at the end of the year, we came out better, but that was mostly because we were not able to fill some positions that were budgeted for. So I always call that a double-edged sword. Yeah, we kind of saved some money by not paying for people, but we really wanted the people. We needed the people, and there were other impacts to the district because of that. Our enrollment is back up and actually above where it was in 2019. Part of what we've tried to do is when we look at the COVID funds, we tried to shift as few positions into COVID funding. It had to be either something extra that could go away, or we use the money to pay for other things that, paid for PPE and other things like that. So things that when the money went away, it wasn't going to cause some massive disruption. Try not to support normal ongoing programs with COVID funding and positions. So there is still some of that, but we tried to minimize it. Our fund balance last year turned out okay, but for this year, we're using the fund balance more than I would like to see simply because of the rapidly rising costs. Our fuel costs are almost double this year. Electricity will be up. Anything that we purchase in vendors is just more expensive, less from the money that we have. We did get 2 CIP projects that were funded by the state, which are both reimbursements. The ACSA restroom remodel was funded. However, that money is going back to the city right now. So we're in the process right now because in order for us to get the money from the state, we have to show that we've paid the city back. So that's up to you guys what you want to do after that. But that's going to be about $200,000 coming back. Because there's always a participating share of 30%.
Contributed previously.
Yeah. So it's up to you if you decide you're gonna give it back to us, but if you give it back to us after that, it will be part of your participating share for funding. It will not be considered CIP. That's totally up to you. We can talk about other things. And then we successfully last year in the middle of COVID passed our Cognia accreditation process. So all of our schools are now accredited, including the district now has received, is now considered accredited, which means we are measured against a statewide set of standards, not just for individual schools, but for schools. Okay. Challenges? Oh, here's enrollment. So this is, you can see this is our overall enrollment. And you can see back in FY18, long before the pandemic, we were at 682, we dipped down a little bit, and now our high, this was the highest we've been in quite some time. It was at FY20, and this, of course, was the year of the pandemic, and then you can see what happened in FY21, a big drop of enrollment. And at FY22, 688 was the last number I had, and this is actually not correct. That should be 725, where that came from. But you can kind of see what happened with the enrollment here. ACSA is the green line. They're flat. They take 60 kids every year. Sometimes a little bit 61, but then they tend to have a drop, so they're flat. This is the extensions. See on FY18 we had 12 kids. Okay, and I don't know what this one numbers come from. I apologize, these numbers are not right. Now we're up to 28 kids. The elementary school is 330, and the high school is at 297. Right in here is where we moved the kids from 6th grade from the elementary school to the high school. You can see they both dropped, but they're close to the same level. So our schools are almost the same size, but the elementary school is actually getting larger, even though they have the same number of grade levels. Now there's 6 grade levels at each school. But the elementary school, that's where our population bubble is coming up, is in the elementary school. So they're growing. So we're back up to 725. That's what that number should be. So we're above pre-pandemic levels. So we are seeing, we're bucking the trend statewide. Okay, so here's our challenges. Again, recruitment retention, as I've said, is a challenge. Things that we really need to do in our schools, we need more trauma-informed training, more trauma-informed practices. That really deals with how we handle disciplinary and behavioral issues just in the classroom and responding in an appropriate way, given what we know so many of our students are going through. We need some work on cultural awareness and culturally responsive curriculum and instruction work. However, the competition for professional development, it takes time for professional development, for teachers to learn, for teachers to collaborate and work together, for teachers to plan and evaluate things. And teacher plates are feeling very full right now. So we're trying to figure out, especially at the elementary school, we're trying to get through this year and the new programs and get things in a better place at Belts campus before we can work on some of those. Again, the uncertainty for the state funding forecast, funding for 6 years in a row, next year will be 7 years. It's negotiations year for certified staff, not classified. And then will the state stave off? Will the legislature make any cuts, support the budget? We just don't know. If it looks like Governor Dunleavy will be re-elected, he has not been as much of a friend to education as we would like, especially when it comes to budget. So we'll have to see what kind of challenges will occur for this next year. Obviously, the price per barrel of oil has been high, but then it's been coming down more, which means that the forward funding that the legislature said they put in place, they put a caveat, if the price of oil drops below a certain level, all that forward funding money will be gone. And then again, there's always a conversation about the PFD and the budget, how are those going to work together. And then again, our COVID funding, quote unquote, cliff, with the money, whatever money we have left over, it has to be expended next year, and then it will be gone. Okay. Okay, this one looks like last year's slide. It did not save properly. Okay. So I apologize for that. So I'll give you an update. So on major maintenance, we submitted 4 projects. One of them is supplemental funding for the roof. We had in FY18, we got funded to do a replacement for the roof at the high school. And unfortunately, by the time we got through the design phase and went out for construction bids, that was right when we were hailing the bids that came back were very few, and they were extremely high, way, way, way above our budget. We tried again for another bid by going back to the design and breaking it down into a base bid and then alternates to see how much of the roof we could get replaced. Still way more than we could afford. We went back to the state and said, what's our options? They allowed us to do a supplemental funding request, actually for the amount of money we would need, increase the amount of money. And that has scored at number 9 on the list, which just came out about a week ago. And usually I'd say if they're in the top 10, they have a pretty good chance of being funded, because historically the state, whatever they've given towards major maintenance, has covered about 10% of the projects, and there are just about 100 projects on the list again this year. We have a shot at getting it done. The challenge with that is that we have to provide a 30% participating share. The additional funding is along the lines of about $5 million. That means that the district has to take $1.7 million out of our CIP, which is about a little more than half of our CIP fund. So that does mean that we have to plan on putting money away continually in that fund for the future. That's what we use for emergency repairs. We have other projects that we would like to have funded. With the elementary school fire alarm replacement is on the list, but it's pretty far down. It's about 40 something again this year. The next highest one is the generator replacement at Belts. We have an undersized, overaged generator there. I think that one's at like number 17. And then we have a new project we submitted, which is to redo the entrances to Belts in elementary school, to beef up the security in there, have buzzer entrances, better cameras, replace some of the ADA issues, and address some of the entrances at Belts where the concrete has become damaged. That's pretty far down the list, around 60, so that's not likely to get funded at all this year. So again, like I said, the pressure we need to replace, our John Deere loader for snow removal is pretty much at the end of its life. So we're looking to replace that, and you know that those are very expensive machines, to look at replacing as well. So, we have some pressures on our major maintenance fund that are coming up as well. So we were able to, at the end of last year, put about $400,000 into it, but we still spent almost all of that with everything that happened last year. So that's what we need to do. We put money in, but then we end up spending it down with everything that happens that we don't always anticipate, unfortunately. Some things we do, and some things that we don't. We still have other things besides these large-scale projects that we'll need to get taken care of in the next year. We took care of the fence, elementary school fence replacement this year. And then we still have other things like that we have to see, do we need to go in-house? Do we need to ask outside? Do we want a better sound system in the gymnasium? You know, we have some electrical issues at the elementary school that need to be taken care of, electrical issues at the high school buildings because they're old, plumbing that needs to be replaced. Just found our dishwasher is dead at the high school and they're using paper plates, and that's $20,000 to $30,000 to put a new dishwasher. All of those kinds of things are things that we're dealing with constantly because our buildings and our facilities are old. All right, so that's the end of my presentation, and I apologize for going over a little bit.
No, it's our fault. We apologize for.
That's okay. We have to educate our new council members so that they have an opportunity to.
Well, all of us, all of us, we won't let Scott take total blame for it.
Any last minute questions?
Yeah, any other things, and I don't know if anybody on the phone, I'm sorry we didn't give an opportunity. Sig or Doug, if you had any questions. Okay, Doug, it looks like he's doing something there.
Anybody online? Ask questions?
Okay, it's not coming through if you are, so I apologize. Anything else from the room here?
I was gonna make a comment, if subs can wash dishes, they get like a bonus, or? It's a joke.
Yeah, you gonna wash dishes?
Wash dishes and dishwasher. Okay,
Yeah.
I'm done.
You would do that every single day. Like 150 kids at the high school. That's a lot of work. We can hire somebody to help our amazing new cook out this year.
All right, Jamie, well, hey, we appreciate your time. Thank you so much. And
Appreciate your
we
opportunity.
appreciate what you're doing out there.
Thank you.
All right, we'll take a couple minute break here and let people stretch their legs real quick, please. And
Oh, yeah, that's the corporation. Oh, that's mine.
Yeah. Yeah, I found the.
Mine's not here.
Oh, really?
And he's like, what's the doc? I said, yes, you're right.
That is for my. So that's.
Yeah, no, really. But I was really impressed with him. He was, he stood in. Nice. Yeah, so. How's everything going?
So as of this morning.
Airlines. Or these? Okay, you want this kind of?
Oh,
this
exciting.
kind?
Either one of
You can have all of them.
Yep.
What's that?
I didn't know that, well, you.
Snacks.
That's right, yep.
them. These are pre-COVID,
Oh, are they?
restaurant snacks.
Oh, they could very well be.
Probably are. No, it's only February 2022.
Okay,
That's still pretty.
yeah, they're,
This was in a year.
yeah.
Especially-
Okay, the time is 7:15 and, call the regular meeting of the Nome Common Council for, Monday, November 14th, 2022 to order. Mr. Clerk, would you call the rolls to establish quorum?
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Here.
Councilmember Martinson.
Here.
Councilmember Piscoya is excused. Councilmember Topcock. Youth Representative Miller.
Okay, we have a quorum, huh?
We have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. Moving on to the approval of agenda, is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Mark Johnson, Councilmember Henderson. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to approval of the minutes, October 24, 2022, regular meeting. Is there a motion to adopt these minutes?
I'll make the motion.
Thank you.
Second.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Martinson, roll call, please.
Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us on to communications. We have one communication this evening in the packet, and that's from NSEDC concerning the 2022 NSEDC Community Benefit Share. Noting that this is the third CBS distribution for 2022. The initial one was there was a special one in August due to heating subsidy. There also was the special distribution around the typhoon, and the city still has some funds available to it. I believe that were set aside for the rec center heating and ventilation, if I'm not mistaken. And I guess we need to have go through the formality of a public hearing on this newest one. Is that correct, Mr. Clerk?
That is correct.
Okay, if we would schedule this for our next regular meeting then, unless we need to do something more special than that.
I think that suffices.
Okay. Thank you. That will bring us down to citizens' comments then. Are there those in the audience that would like to address the council this evening?
Davis Hubby for the record, KNOM Radio. Most of you may know me. I've definitely sat in the back for quite a few years now. Pleasure to actually formally meet all of you. Just wanted to let you know that I am the interim general manager of KNOM Radio now, and we are looking for a number of people. Local hires would be appreciated. So just wanted to kind of put it out there, introduce myself formally, and we look forward to working in the community as we always have and continuing to be part of the community. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, and that's what the congratulations was for. Okay, congratulations. Are there others? Mr. Chiefs, good to see you this evening. Did you have anything you wanted to say? We're not gonna make you sit all night if you would like.
Well, no, I appreciate it. I'm just happy to be here.
All right, all right, good to see you both, gentlemen. Thank you. If there's not anybody else wishing to address the council, we will, there's another opportunity later in the agenda. We will move on to new business. First item, in first reading, Mr. Clerk, will you read resolution or ordinance 22-11-01?
O 2211-01, an ordinance authorizing the disposal of municipal property by easement to the State of Alaska Department of Transportation and Public Facilities for incorporation into the Port Road right-of-way reconstruction project.
Thank you. Is there a motion to pass ordinance 22-11-01 on to second reading, public hearing, and final passage? Next meeting.
Make a motion.
Second.
Thank you, Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Martinson. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Then the next item here is resolution 22-11-01. Would you read that by title, please?
R 2211-01, a resolution of the City of Nome authorizing participation in the Community Development Block Grant Program.
Thank you. Is there a motion to adopt resolution 22-11-01?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Councilmember Henderson, Councilmember Martinson, and I see Butch is here this evening. Good to have you. I don't think you need to say anything about this. We're fully aware, and but thank you for your attendance. Roll call, please, on the adoption.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
if I would, did you get a chance to talk to Ms. Pauletta Bourne? Is this the correct resolution?
Authority to participate? Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I know there's what we passed this summer didn't meet the strict regulations of the grant, and we've got to do it
The
again.
authority to participate includes the dollar amount that we're applying for. So that's what needed to be in the resolution itself. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. Sounds good. All right, so we're good then, Mr. Clerk?
I'm looking for the resolution itself. I don't remember
93.
the dollar amount specifically.
675,397.
Okay, is that correct? Okay, perfect. That's all I had.
Okay, thank you. Roll call, please, then, on the adoption of the resolution.
Councilmember Topcock. Councilmember Henderson.
Yes.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
Yes.
Councilmember Martinson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you. Moving on then to utility report, Mr. Martin.
Thanks, guys. Trying to slow things down. Hello, Ken Morton on behalf of Community Utilities, your local utility company. Pretty standard for this time of year. Number of water line increases that people have been reporting, it's dropping. But the average water flow is increasing, which is an indication that people are running their pipes, running the taps. Sending some folks off for training, a couple going to COTS for wastewater training in early December. Got a fellow off at lineman school, working on inventory. Line crews wrapped up the pole straightening efforts along the Beam Road. Just got a little bit too cold for the equipment out there, so brought that back in. Late service work, streetlights, pretty standard stuff. Power plant side, we're looking to issue a request for proposals this week for that battery system. I look to get proposals back in December and hopefully be under contract in early January. Looking for a big battery. Any questions about this or anything else? Scott?
You don't come to speak, don't you? I got the look.
All right.
I actually have just something I was curious about. Raise it right out towards the old mine, and those poles are going down, and that line is still connected to the line that's going to the
Right.
Snake River.
We wanted to de-energize that, but in order to do that, we would have to shut the power off to the Snake River compound. So it's gonna be a next spring thing before we can feel comfortable, unless we have a warm spell. If it warms up, we'll do it.
Okay, I was just
Expecting that
curious.
we're gonna pull the conductor. And grab the poles as we need them. Pretty good resting place right there.
Cool. Sounds good. All right, moving on to city manager's report, and there's a written report at page 96, 97, 98. And I'm thinking Glenn is on here because you're using his Zoom account, or is he on there?
Nope, Glenn is on here. This
Oh.
is my team's account.
Oh, okay. Hi, Glenn. Yeah. Okay, so we have your written report, and I mean, was there anything you wanted to talk about specifically, or just take questions if there are any? Okay, thank you. Does anybody have any questions for the city manager? All right, thank you for sitting there, Glenn, and it's bedtime for you wherever you're at. Good night. Thanks again. We'll talk to you. Cheers. Bye-bye. All right, that brings us down then to citizens' comments again. Are there members of the audience that would like to address the council? Okay, and seeing no indication, we'll move on to council member comments then, please, Mr. Clerk.
Councilmember Topcock.
Great, thank you, council member.
Councilmember Henderson.
Been on the council for about a year, and one of the things I've been curious about is when we start the meeting, why we don't say the pledge of allegiance. And it looks like you're ready with an answer.
No,
but
go
I was
ahead. Finish.
I was just asking the question. I know Nome Public Schools does at their school board meetings, and I think most of the municipalities around the state do, at least based on I did a real quick search. So I was just curious if there was a reason that we didn't do it. I think it's kind of a good thing to do. I think it unifies a little bit the meetings and adds a little seriousness to the tenor of it, if you will, as we sit and do the business for the citizens of Nome. So if the council didn't have any serious, major concerns about it, I would request that it's typically inserted between the call to order and I think the roll call. And I would just, if nobody had any major concerns with that, I would ask that we institute that as part of the agenda for council meetings going forward.
Okay, well, I guess one of the things that's fallen off of our agenda after the roll call is the invocation, which was standard for ever and ever and ever, amen. And somewhere along the line, somebody decided to just kind of drop that. So there's no reason we can't put the pledge in there.
Great. Thank you.
I think it's important that maybe by example, they might do it elsewhere.
Appreciate that. That's all I got.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Doug Johnson. Councilmember Mark Johnson.
I don't think Jamie mentioned it tonight, but I did see in her Nome announcement that some local, I think it's COER maybe some other local organizations were providing time off or time for their staff to be able to lend a hand at the school if needed. I think that's a really good thing, that if our local organizations are able to do that and lend our hand at our schools, so we don't have to have any more school absences because of lack of substitute teachers. So I was happy to see that maybe Quirk is doing that, and I think that's an encouraging thing.
Are you guys doing that too, or did I hear something?
We are, I mentioned that to our staff. I know that our employer allows people to go out and volunteer, and I've encouraged our staff to do that as well. And once I get my nerve up, I might put my name on the list and see what happens. Lunch duty. What's that?
Lunch duty?
That's right.
Start with kindergarten.
You've heard the F word a couple of times, so you probably can do the high school.
Yeah, I think it's a good thing, and I think if the community, everybody kicks in a little bit, especially employers. Thank you for bringing that up.
Super, thank you.
Councilmember Martin.
I don't have anything.
Okay, great, thank you. Well, if we take it. Okay, Student Representative Miller, do you have any comments? Sorry about that. I didn't hear you on the roll call, so I didn't realize you were on there. Thank you for your comment. The Okay, we will look at that. Thank you, Councilmember. Are there, I guess back to what I was talking about, the city manager noted in here that we had a meeting with the Iron Dog folks. They are still very much looking forward to their arrival in Nome and continue to use Nome as the halfway location. Later this week, we're expecting a couple people from Iditarod to pop into town as well. So that just with the changes in hotels and everything else here, see if we, things that we might need to do a little differently or come up with other accommodations that we can work through that. So the events are still ongoing, and be some other little work in front ahead of us, I think, and possibly some community accommodations that are required. But I think Nome has always been resilient in the past, and we'll step it up to these challenges as well. And while it's a little ways away, the Christmas extravaganza thing, just to put that on people's calendar, is December 8th, Thursday, starting that again after a couple of days off. And we will be coming up with the program and the plan on that, and be asking some of the community members to assist with that as well. I think that's it for this evening. Thank you. This would have been the shortest meeting if we hadn't gone over, but it was good to hear from Jamie and get her that other time. So we do appreciate the superintendent of schools being with us prior in the work session to tell us how things were going out at the school campuses in our district. With that, the time is 7:34. And meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
Which of the two setups that we just use, we aren't using, you know? Let's see.
Like I said, since.
Okay.
They want to clean up. They wanted more money.
Yeah.
And it was.
Okay.
And they also didn't like cleaning up.
Yeah, you get everything.
Makes sense.
I am blanking because
Are they finished?
I don't think, yeah, Obi, I don't think we've done it. That's new man. Right from the beginning. But yeah, because I don't think we've had that one.
Yeah, chat, well, they are as of today.
They have
that's
another
what's
one
on-
up in Panorama area.
Whether that will change or not, it's already. But Jazz and,
But yeah.
I'll tell you what, it would be fun.
yeah, so, we probably have reason to have a dinner anyway.
Welcome back, man.
Scott, how are you?
Good to see you. Get in here Thursday.
Oh, and I like all kinds of stuff. It's just,